Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing my review for The Last Ronin, issue number 3, Fight or Flight. I absolutely loved it. Another fantastic issue. We got issues 1 and 2 back there. If you haven't seen my reviews on those, you guys can easily check them out. I think this was a great third issue. We are officially over the halfway point with this. We only got 2 more to go. And I love the way they did this one because issues 1 and 2 was like, okay, issue 1, all the action, like the mystery of like who is the last Ronin and stuff like that. We get to the end, it's Mikey. It's like, okay, that was an amazing first issue. It was just crazy action. Who is the turtle? That was the big mystery. Issue 2 comes in. We know what we're getting into because we know that it's going to show the death of Raphael. So we get some of the stuff in the past. We know that the truce is broken. We get that. We hear about the explosion, but we don't get to see it officially until this issue. And it's like, okay. So we kind of got that answer. And then, of course, we know that the issues are kind of just going to, unfortunately, continue down that path. Like, half of it is set in what I guess is technically like the modern era. And now we go through and it continues that storyline where half is in the future or the modern era and then half is in the past, and we basically only get the past just to see like the sad stuff where everyone dies off, or we get like cool classic Turtles art and we get a little backstory. So we get another one of those with April in this one, which I thought was cool. We see the explosion officially. We see how April and Mikey end up split up, and they find out exactly what happened, where Mikey, he was kind of in a daze. He just, of course, huge explosion, he just assumed everyone died, so he of course goes back to the layers. Like, I picked up some weapons. I tried to contact Master Splinter and Donatello. I heard nothing, so I gathered some weapons, hopped on the plane, hid away, and then I went up to Japan. And so that explains, his flashback from the last issue, where it was like, okay, this is how he ended up kind of just off in the mountains and stuff. So I love the way it was handled. We find out that Baxter Stockman, of all people, this guy right here, he ended up being the one to kill Leo and Casey. And I don't know how I feel about that. I was like, with Raph, he got to go out the way he wanted to. And maybe it's just because Baxter Stockman, even when he does stuff, he's always got the reputation of being the nerdy scientist. That's always his thing. But he does get stuff done. Like I said, this version, like, no matter what, this version will always be my favorite of Stockman because he was so hardcore in that cartoon that Shredder had to send him to another dimension, because it was like, he's beating us up, he's beating the Turtles up, we gotta just get rid of this dude. And I always think of that, and I'm like, he definitely gets stuff done, for sure. And it was just crazy to see him. I didn't expect him to be involved. I guess it makes sense with the whole Fugitoid thing. It was like, if you're gonna have the hero side of the science, then of course you gotta have Baxter Stockman. It makes perfect sense, honestly, but I didn't really think of that. So to see him come in, which there were a million questions I had going through this. I was just like, okay, I didn't expect this, I didn't expect that. Literally from the beginning, it starts off with a flashback, and the flashback, it made sense at first. It was just like, okay, here's Hiroto, and it's him going through his initiation. He's becoming the official leader of the clan. And I was like, okay, it makes sense. Of course, it's a little flashback, and it's gonna, show him talk about war and everything that happened. He's like, oh, it's been 10 years since that happened. I'm like, And then he said something that just completely threw me off, which was, why don't we send out an offer of peace to the Turtles that are here in Japan and in New York? And I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So after Raph died and Karai was nearly killed, they time skipped 10 years. And it turned out that they've been having this war this whole time. They just basically went back into fighting like they had been pretty much in like the old series, minus Raph and Karai. And it was just like, wow, this is nuts. I did not expect that. I thought it was just the most horrible night ever, and Mikey and April ended up escaping. And I thought it was just one horrible event after another. And it ended up being that one moment, and then they skipped 10 years, and Hiroto's like, all right, I think it's time to talk about peace. It's time that we officially end this war. And then poof, they start fighting again. And I'm like, I mentioned in my last review, and it seemed like just out of nowhere, they even referenced it, where it was like, I thought we had a truce. I thought we were past all this. And then just poof, out of nowhere, they're suddenly fighting again. And it's the exact same thing this time, where it didn't seem like he was hinting at anything. And I know that he calls Master Splinter and Donnie to him, or, they're the two that chose to leave. But he left, and then it seemed like Stockman was kind of doing his own thing when he attacked them. He was technically with the Foot Clan, so, I highly doubt that there was this weird thing where it's like, oh, they just had, like, no communication whatsoever. But at the same time, it was just interesting, because I'm like, okay, say he sends out this offer of peace. If he could communicate with the Turtles that fast, he could easily communicate with the rest of the Foot Clan, like, hey, we're doing a truce, and that's all there is to it. And yet that didn't happen. So I'm like, was it a trap the whole time? Because it seemed real. Like, it seemed legit when he was doing it. It's like, it's time that we begin to speak about peace. And they didn't hint at all that it was actually meant to be a trap. Like, they didn't do, like, the classic evil thing where he says, like, we'll say that it's for peace or whatever. It seemed like he was legit, like, all right, let's do this, and it's going to be peace talks. Master Splinter, being Master Splinter, he's like, we have to at least try. We've lost a lot, but technically he's lost more. So we have to at least try. With all the stuff that's happened with our families, they still honor certain codes. So we have to at least give it a shot, but we won't let our guard down. And I was like, okay. As soon as they take off, Stockman's like, all right, they're gone, kill everybody. And he just wanted the Fugitoid. And so I'm like, it was so hard to tell because I'm like, it makes sense that he'd be able to communicate. If he wants peace, they would not have attacked. But for some reason, Stockman still did it anyway. So it was like he never really wanted peace to begin with. And they'll probably explain that in the next one. But I was like, it just seems so legit when he said it in the beginning. I guess that was the whole point. And then it was just like, no, they ended up attacking. The Foot Clan attacks. We see the, I think it was Captain Lee, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not familiar with that guy, but it was cool to see, like, he had the full-on purple dragon tattoo. I was like, oh, that's cool. They actually show it. But I like what they did with it. I thought it was really cool. And then, everyone starts getting attacked, and then it's just absolute chaos. And so the Foot Clan comes in. They send in the robots and everything. So they went, like, classic cartoon style, but a little bit cooler. They're definitely tougher-looking robots for sure. And so they go through all this chaos. Everyone's, they get killed off in the beginning by, like, the normal Foot Clan ninjas. They're blowing holes in the wall. They're basically doing a full-on blitz attack. And they're completely trying to wipe everybody out just to get to the Fugitoid. And that's what made it seem a little bit separate. They do explain, though, in the kind of future timeline, that Stockman still has a specific position of power, within the city. So clearly, he's not in the bad graces of Hiroto, because who knows? Like, maybe he didn't do that with his blessing, but at the end it's like, they're dead anyway, so what do I care? It's like, technically they killed my grandfather and my mom, so whatever. I was gonna do peace, but if you killed them, then I guess they dead. So that could be the case, honestly. Like, it doesn't seem like he'd really care that much, and we see more of him in this as well. And specifically, we see, like, the crazy side of him, which I thought was interesting, because the first two issues seemed like he was just the evil dictator of the city. It made sense. They even explained the wall around the city. I thought that was him in the first issue. I was like, oh, he, like, it was like crazy. He, like, took over. And it was like, no, that was actually something they did just because the actual sea levels were rising. They had to build a wall around New York. And I was like, oh, that was just a part of the world. He didn't even do that. It was just kind of fortunate for him because it allowed him to technically have, like, his own little fortress, like, city-state sort of deal. So that was crazy. They explained the whole gang war stuff where it's like, it's been all this time, and especially after the explosion, they didn't really have the turtles and the rest of their members and stuff like that, which, once again, all of that was amazing. I was like, wow, just reading that where it was like they had other people that knew about the turtles and they're all underground. I love the outfits. I was like, they really need to make figures of all the turtles. Like, even Master Splinter, he had the cool leather battle armor and stuff. I was like, all of this looks cool. So I hope we get some figures of that, because I was like, all those outfits looked absolutely amazing. But I was like, this should be a series in itself. Just the past time, like, it would be a super dark series, but it would be amazing to watch because they show other people knowing about the turtles. They're the underground resistance, kind of like, the same in the future timeline, or modern. I'll just go with future. But it's the same in the future timeline, but it started way back then. And I was like, this would be a great series to actually see them go through, where they are like the final thing holding on to the city. And then once they blew up, they blew up the store and everything, which was a really cool moment because they show the signs and everything and they blow it up. And then Casey Marie ends up being at the same sign. And, of course, she knows the history of that corner. And I thought that was cool. And in the very next panel, or, the next page, they actually show April talking to Mikey. And you can see that she went back at some point and she took the Bleecker Street sign. So I thought that was actually really cool, too. But I like the way they did it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, Baxter Stockman being the one to get to kill two of the characters, I was kind of salty about, because I'm like, I know he gets stuff done, and clearly he did. Like, he technically didn't destroy the Fugitoid, but he was like, oh, if I can't have you, then no one can. And I was like, yeah, that's dark, but it makes sense. And he blows up like everything, but it's still Baxter Stockman, and I'm just like, it hurts a little bit more when it's Baxter Stockman, because he's still technically that nerdy dude. But I like the design of him as well. He seemed like he had like 3 little things in his forehead, and I was like, I'm curious if that is gonna kind of come into play, when we see him again. But it was crazy. I wasn't expecting it to go the way that it did. And then, of course, you end the issue and it ends on like, oh, here's the next issue. And it's just more depressing stuff where it's just like, yeah, and we're going to kill Master Splinter and Donnie. We knew it was coming, of course, but it's just like, you finish an issue and it's like, oh, that's super cool. They have like a new turtle tank, and April's like, we're ready to go to war. Like, we've been training. And then it's like, here's the next issue. They're dead too. So it was just like, oh, I don't want to see that. It was the same with the last one where it's just like, oh man, I'm excited for the next one. But it's like, like that's what we have to like look forward to, if you really want to call it that, where it's like, oh, I can't wait to watch Splinter and Donatello get killed. So it's interesting for sure. I think it was a great third issue. We saw crazy Hiroto. Also, was he on the Statue of Liberty? It looked like it was the Statue of Liberty, but like it was gray, and they don't technically show it. But I'm like, the only thing I can think of is he's on the Statue of Liberty. Like, they basically like built out the rest of the island, and like just they basically covered it, and it goes all the way to the Statue of Liberty now. And then he has this crazy moment where he's talking and everything, and he's like, oh, I'm the leader in this and stuff. And then he kind of breaks down. It's like, oh, mom, you left me. And he starts crying. And then he kind of builds himself back up. And he's on like this weird God stuff where he's like, I can't die. And he jumps off. Technically he fell, which I thought was kind of funny. But then he caught himself. But then it seemed like he actively let go and was like, my angels won't let me die. And I'm like, this dude is insane. Which they reference with a random set of claws coming in to pick him up. And it's like, you're crazy. And then they cut away from them. I'm like, they're just going to tease me with that. Because I don't have any idea. So if you know a character that kind of fits that mold, I would love to know, because I'm not like super well versed with all the characters in the Turtles, but I was just like, okay, so he's kind of crazy. He also wore like a lot of makeup in this. I felt like in these first two issues we didn't really get to see him dressed up like that pretty much at all. I thought he was definitely like, actually here's a shot of him right here. So in this one, he's just normal. He's just the dude. He's kind of just dressed in black. It's like, okay, this is her son and everything, and he's doing what he's doing. I was like, okay, that seems simple enough, okay. And then in this one, he's a little bit different. He comes on, I can't say he comes on TV, but he has like his whole thing, and it's just like, he's dressed up in the jacket. He's got the markings on his face. It's a cool jacket, but I kind of like the style of the jacket. But he's got like the markings and all this other stuff, and I'm like, this seems like a different dude. Like, it just seems like he's definitely reached a different stage. And I do specify, like, something's about to happen. It's like, let's begin. So, I don't know what's happening, but clearly, he's going into, like, the next phase of... I mean, granted, it's only a 5-issue thing, so it makes sense that, like, this was the big change. Like, whatever's happening, which I assume is him waking up his mom. So, it seems like that's going to happen, I would guess, at the end of the next issue, and then we figure out, what ends up going on there. But, he was going in full crazy mode, and I was like, this is interesting, because he seemed kind of normal at first. I thought he was just the new leader, but I mean, Shredder was crazy. Karai seemed to be kind of normal, and I thought her son was kind of taking that same path. Like, they're all like crazy assassins and stuff, but as far as like compared to Shredder, like everybody's pretty normal. Like that dude, technically, I think he was pretty insane. So Karai was always, I felt kind of normal, and then it seemed like her son was in the same realm. And then this one was like, no, this dude's effed up. Like, he's got some issues where, like he didn't have anybody. Like, he's the leader of this assassin clan. And then his mom is comatose, has been comatose for decades now. And so he's in this really weird position where he's like, I'm kind of godly a little bit. I control everything that's here. Like, they only exist. These are ants waiting to be crushed. And they live by my will, which he even says to the people. And so I'm like, this is weird. I don't know what to expect from this guy anymore, because they've shown the crazy side of him. And I didn't expect that. And so I'm like, okay, he's on like this really weird train that I'm excited to see where they go in these last two issues. And then, like I said, he just drops and someone's like, oh, you're crazy. And they come in to save him, and some metal talons come in. So I don't know what to expect from that, but I'm excited. I'm definitely excited to see it. Once again, it seems weird that every time they're like, oh, we're supposed to have peace, just nothing. It just goes away, just out of nowhere. Suddenly, they just change their minds. And in the last issue, it was easy. It was like, okay, yeah, they're villains. They're the Foot Clan. That kind of makes sense. And then to do it twice, something's off. And, I questioned it the first time, because I was like, that seems weird that it just, out of nowhere, they suddenly decided to attack. And then it happened again where, like I said, it didn't seem like he was trying to trick them, but that probably was the case, technically. But I'm just like, he seemed legit. For that to be like the first thing he said, and they don't really hint at it, which they could easily do in the next issue, where they hint at the fact that that was a trick the whole time. It was just meant to make us think that it was peace. But I'm just like, that seems weird. It seems weird that, there were supposed to be these talks of peace, and then as soon as they leave, Stockman attacks everybody and, kills them off, and then everything that happens with Splinter and Donatello. So I don't know. It could just be as simple as that, where they're just playing with us. The first time really was they're villains. They just decided, truce smoosh. And then they just end it, and they try to kill everybody, and then the same thing happened the second time. Like I said, it could literally just be he wanted peace, and then was like, oh, dang, I forgot to stop Stockman. And it was like, oh, well, you killed him? I guess they won't stop now. Like, we already killed 2 extra people. I guess we got to kill the rest. Like, it could easily be that way. I could see that, and I'd be like, that's effed up, but also it makes sense, because it's like he was trying But then it's like, oh, well, if he already messed up and he's technically on my side, like he wouldn't care that much. I could honestly see that being the case, and I'd actually buy it. Where it was like, I wanted peace, and then Stockman messed up, and then you guys are just gonna be extra pissed, and I'm like, well, and then he just kills them anyway, just because technically that would be easier to do than try to convince them like I didn't want that to happen or anything. So I don't really know what to expect. I don't know what to expect to see when they hit Japan. But I'm excited. I'm excited for these last two issues. They have, like I said, like almost a new turtle van. They have a bunch of vehicles in there, actually. So everyone's kind of building up because it's like now it's time to fight. They're going to face off against Stockman again. So that's kind of cool. And, it's a 1 in a million shot sort of deal, but it's definitely going to end up happening. So they're going to end up facing off against Stockman. They're going to take him out. They might flat out kill him. Who knows? And then they're going to end up moving on to their main challenge, and that might also include Karai if she does end up waking up. So I'm not entirely sure what to expect, but once again, great freaking issue. It sucks that they're killing characters, but it's definitely entertaining. Like I said, I love the outfits. I hope we get some figures of those because they look super sweet. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what we get for these last two issues. I would love to know your thoughts and theories even for the last two. I mean, I didn't expect, Stockman to come into it. Like I said, thinking about it, it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. If you're going to have the Fugitoid, of course you have Stockman. That's like perfect foils. You have the good scientist, the evil scientist. That's almost perfect. So I should have seen that one coming, but in my head I was just like, oh, what's going to happen here? And so now we kind of find out his involvement and how he was even involved with that, or like how she even had his head, because he was actually there. Which wasn't the same night I thought it was, because that's why I was confused. I was like, oh, like, how did that even happen? And it turns out after Raphael died, it was a freaking 10-year time skip, which I really wasn't expecting. And then they went back to, like, death again. So I don't know what's going to happen in this next issue. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. Like, it's just crazy. It's entertaining to watch, and it's just like, okay, this next issue is like the final past death. Like, we're going to see Splinter and Donatello get killed. So that leaves only the people that are alive right now. So we have Mikey, April, Fugitoid, and then, of course, Casey Marie. And I hope none of them die. But if anyone does, it's probably going to be Fugitoid, if I'm being totally honest. So we just have to see what happens. But that's what's going to happen there. And then I think issue 5, most likely, is just going to be all in the present. But they could reveal something. Like I said, I don't know. There's just a weird thing in my head where I'm like, it just seems odd to me that they've mentioned peace twice. And both times, it seems like there hasn't been an answer yet as to why it was just suddenly not real. Like, it wasn't the case. Like, the second time, like I said, could have just been a trick the whole time. But something about it, I'm just like, it just seems odd that it just broke. Just because. They just felt like, sure, I'm going to kill them. Out of nowhere, just because. That just seems so odd to me. Both times. 2 times, even. Like, not even both times. Just twice they've done that. And it's like, there's got to be something else. It could just be a trick just to make people theorize like I am right now. But I'm like, to have that happen 2 times out of nowhere. Granted, they weren't really at peace, the second time. They've been fighting the whole time. But for him to communicate that and make it a trap just seems so odd. I'm like, just send Baxter Stockman in there. Like, it doesn't make sense to even say like, oh, we're going to broker peace or anything. It's like, just kill them. So I'm confused. Like, it just makes no sense to me. What's the point? I know Master Splinter is amazing, but it's like, 2 people, Splinter and Donatello leave. And granted, they didn't know how many people would go, but it's like a tiny handful of people, if that, might actually leave and go to Japan. How much of an advantage is that really when you're sending in robots and monsters anyway? So I'm just like, there's something else. There's got to be something else, because it seems too simplistic to just be like, oh yeah, let's get them out of here. It's like, you hardly split up anybody, considering they have like their own entire army. If they got ambushed, they still would be ambushed. It wouldn't make a difference. So I feel like there's got to be something. It seems just odd to take extra steps, and I'm like, they could just ambush them again like they did the first time, which was almost successful, and then clearly it was successful the second time as well. Like, they didn't kill everybody either time, but they got some hits in for sure. And I'm just like, that just seems odd. Peace twice and it just suddenly broke. I feel like there's something going on. I would love to know if you think I'm right about that, what theories you guys have in general. What do you guys think about issue number 3? What your theories are and hopes and dreams and all that good stuff for issues both 4 and 5. I have no clue when they're coming out. I didn't even know this was releasing. I got an email this morning and I was like, sweet. I thought it was coming out in June. So I didn't realize it was, I know we're super close, but I thought it was going to be, mid-June or later even. So I was super happy. I was like, oh, sweet. I'm going to read it right now. But I don't know when the next one comes out, but I'm excited. You got 2 more to go. Would love to know your thoughts on this issue. And like I said, thoughts and theories going forward. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.